The crystal walls of the palace glowed with soft blue light. Kang Minho stood at his post near the grand doors, his rifle held at attention. Outside, the sounds of celebration filled the night air. The Festival of Stars was the biggest event of the year on Althea Prime. Nobles and dignitaries from across the empire had gathered in the palace. Minho had been stationed here for 6 months. He was part of a military exchange program between Earth and the Althean Empire. Most days were boring. He stood guard, watched the alien nobles walk past, and tried to understand their complex politics. The Altheans were tall, elegant beings with skin that glowed softly in different colors depending on their mood. Empress Valora was the most impressive of them all. Her markings shone like stars. She had never spoken to him directly. To her, he was just another guard, another piece of furniture in her perfect palace. Minho did not mind. He was here to do his duty, nothing more. The first sign of trouble came at midnight. The palace lights flickered. Minho's communication device went dead. Then he heard shouting from the main hall. He moved quickly toward the sound, his training taking over. The throne room was chaos. Armed soldiers in dark uniforms were everywhere. These were not palace guards. Their armor bore the mark of Lord Carinth, the Empress's cousin. Nobles were running in every direction, trying to escape. Minho saw something that shocked him. The palace guards were not fighting back. They were joining the attackers, a coup. This was a military coup. Minho pushed through the crowd, searching for the Empress. He found her near her throne, surrounded by Carinth's soldiers. Her advisors had already fled. Her personal guards had abandoned their posts. Even her closest friends had vanished into the night. Empress Valora stood alone. Her glowing markings had dimmed to almost nothing. She looked smaller somehow, less magnificent without her supporters around her. The soldiers moved closer, weapons raised. Minho did not think. He acted. He stepped between the Empress and the soldiers, raising his rifle. His voice was steady and calm. "Stop where you are." The soldiers paused. They looked confused. One of them laughed. He was a large Althean with deep purple markings. "Human, this does not concern you. Lord Carinth will rule now. The Empress is finished. Leave while you can." Minho did not move. He kept his rifle pointed at them. His grandfather had been a soldier. His father had been a soldier. They had taught him about duty and honor. They had taught him that you do not abandon your post. You do not leave people behind. I said stop. Behind him, Empress Valora spoke for the first time. Her voice was cold and formal, but he could hear the shock in it. "Soldier, you are dismissed. This is not your fight." Minho did not turn around. He kept his eyes on the soldiers in front of him. "With respect, Your Majesty, I am still on duty, and my duty is to protect you." The soldier with purple markings raised his weapon. The situation was about to turn violent. But then another voice called out. It was Lord Carinth himself walking into the throne room with more soldiers behind him. "Wait," Carinth said. He studied Minho with interest. "The human shows courage, or stupidity, perhaps both." He turned to Valora. "Cousin, your empire has abandoned you. Your guards have joined me. Your nobles have fled. Even your most trusted friends chose survival over loyalty. Yet this primitive human stands alone in your defense." "How amusing." Valora said nothing. Her markings grew even dimmer. Carinth waved his hand. "Kill them both." Minho fired first. His shot hit the ceiling above the soldiers, bringing down a section of crystal. It crashed down, creating chaos and buying precious seconds. He grabbed the Empress's arm. "Run!" They ran. Valora knew the palace better than anyone. She led them through hidden passages that Minho had never seen. Service corridors used by palace workers. Old tunnels that dated back centuries. Behind them they could hear soldiers searching, but the passages were like a maze. Finally, they emerged in the lower city. The celebration was still going on above, but down here, the streets were quiet and dark. Valora leaned against a wall, breathing hard. Her elegant dress was torn. Her glowing markings were barely visible now. She looked at Minho. Really looked at him. Perhaps for the first time since he had arrived at the palace. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was quiet, stripped of its usual authority. "You owe me nothing. Your people owe me nothing. You could have walked away. Why did you stay?" Minho checked his rifle and looked around for threats. When he answered, his voice was simple and honest. "Because it was the right thing to do." Valora stared at him. In all her years of ruling, surrounded by politicians and schemers, she had never heard anything quite so simple. So impossible to understand. The human made no sense to her. But he was all she had left. Above them, the palace burned. The coup was complete. The empire she had ruled for decades was gone, and she was alone in the dark streets with a human soldier who stayed when everyone else ran. Everything had changed in a single night. The lower city was nothing like the palace. Narrow streets wound between old buildings that leaned against each other like tired old friends. The air smelled of strange cooking and engine oil. Mignot kept alert as they moved through the darkness. Every sound could be a threat. Valora walked beside him, trying to hide her glowing markings under a torn piece of her dress. Even dim, they could give her away. The Empress, who had never walked these streets before, now stumbled over broken pavement. She had always traveled in floating vehicles high above the common people. They found shelter in an abandoned building. Mignot checked every corner before he let Valora sit down. She collapsed against the wall, exhausted. Her perfect appearance was gone. Her hair was messy. Her dress was ruined. But she was alive. Minho's communication device buzzed. Messages were coming through from Commander Park Ji-won at the human embassy. He read them quietly. Return to base immediately. Private Kang, report your status. This is a direct order. Come to the embassy now. Valora watched him read the messages. Her eyes were different now. Not cold and distant like before. She looked tired and human despite being alien. Your commander wants you back, she said. It was not a question. Minho nodded. He did not turn off the device, but he did not answer either. You should go, Valora said. Her voice was quiet. Carinth will be hunting me. Anyone with me is in danger. Your people will be angry if you stay. This is not your war. Minho looked at her. In the dim light, she did not look like an empress anymore. She looked like someone who had lost everything. Someone who expected to lose everything else too, including him. I am not leaving, he said simply. Why? The question came out desperate. I do not understand you humans. I was terrible to you. I barely knew your name. I thought your people were simple and primitive. Why would you throw away your career for me? Mignot was quiet for a moment. He thought about his grandfather's stories. About honor and duty. About staying when things got hard. My grandfather told me something, he said. He said that character is what you do when no one is watching. When there is nothing to gain. When it would be easier to walk away. He looked directly at her. Everyone walked away from you tonight. I will not be one of them. Valora's markings flickered slightly. A sign of deep emotion among her people. She opened her mouth to speak, but sounds outside interrupted them. Voices, footsteps, searchers. Minho moved to the window and looked out carefully. Carinth's soldiers were going door to door searching buildings. They had tracked them somehow. Maybe heat signatures. Maybe informants. It did not matter how. They were coming. We need to move, he whispered. They slipped out through a back entrance. The lower city was a maze of passages and alleys. Valora knew the layout from old maps she had studied as a child. Maps that showed the city before the palace was built. She guided them through turns and tunnels that confused even Minho's good sense of direction. But the soldiers were everywhere. Each time they thought they were safe, more searchers appeared. The net was closing. Carinth was putting serious resources into finding them. They turned a corner and ran straight into a group of lower city residents. Mignot raised his rifle, but Valora put her hand on his arm. Wait, she said. The Altheans in front of them were not soldiers. They were workers. Common people with worn clothes and tired eyes. One of them, an older male with faded gray markings, stepped forward. He stared at Valora. Empress Valora, he said quietly. She stood up straight, trying to find her dignity even in her ruined state. Yes, I am Valora. The old Althean looked at her for a long moment. Mignot tensed, ready for betrayal. There must be a reward for turning her in. These people looked poor. They needed money, but the old Althean bowed. Just slightly, then he gestured to a door behind him. This way, quickly. They followed him into a large underground room. It was a shelter of some kind. Dozens of people were there, families with children. They all stopped and stared when Valora entered. The old Althean, who introduced himself as Frix, brought them water and food. Simple food, nothing like palace meals. But Valora ate it without complaint. Why are you helping me? She asked Frix. Frix smiled sadly. Because Carinth is worse. He has been squeezing the lower city for years, taking more taxes, giving less support. He thinks only of power. You. He paused. You were distant, yes. You did not see us. But you were not cruel. And now you are here, running like we run. That means something. Valora's markings dimmed even more, not from fear this time but from shame. She had never known about Corinth's abuse of power. She had never even thought to check on the lower city. She had been too comfortable in her palace. Explosions suddenly rocked the building. Corinth's forces had found them. The shelter entrance was blown open. Soldiers poured in, weapons firing. Fricks and his people scattered, trying to protect their children. Minho returned fire, moving to cover Valora. He took down 2 soldiers, but there were too many. A blast hit near him. The pain was immediate and sharp. He felt something hot in his side. Blood. He kept fighting, but his vision was getting blurry. He heard Valora's voice, urgent and commanding. She was dragging him toward another exit. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was her face, her markings glowing bright with emotion. "Don't you dare die, human," she said. "I forbid it." Then everything went black. Minho woke up in pain. His side burned where the blast had hit him. He tried to sit up, but gentle hands pushed him back down. Valora's face appeared above him. She looked worried, which was strange. Empresses were not supposed to look worried. "Be still," she said. "The wound is bad, but you will survive. Frix's daughter is a healer. She has been treating you." They were in a different shelter now, deeper underground. Minho could hear water dripping somewhere in the darkness. His uniform was gone, replaced with simple clothes. Bandages wrapped tight around his chest. "How long?" he asked. 2 days. You lost a lot of blood." Valora's voice was different, softer. She had been taking care of him herself, he realized. An empress caring for a common soldier. The world really had turned upside down. "We cannot stay here," Minho said. "They will find us again." "I know." Valora stood and walked to the small window. "We need to leave Althea Prime completely. But my face is everywhere now. Corinth has put a massive reward on my head, and the spaceport is heavily guarded." Minho thought for a moment, ignoring the pain in his side. "We need help. Someone who knows how to move goods without asking questions." "A smuggler," Valora said. She almost smiled. "I never thought I would need one." Fricks knew someone. A human trader named Han Sora, who operated a small cargo ship. She had a reputation for bending rules when the price was right. Frick sent a message through secure channels. Captain Han Sora arrived at midnight. She was young, maybe 30, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She looked at Valora, then at Minho, then back at Valora. "Are you insane?" she asked. "Do you know what Corinth will do to me if I am caught with the Empress?" "Name your price," Valora said. Sora laughed. "There is no price high enough for this risk." But she kept looking at Minho. "You are the soldier everyone is talking about." "The one who stayed." Minho nodded. "I am. Why did you do it?" Sora asked. "You could be safe at the embassy right now. Instead you are here wounded, hiding in a hole with the deposed Empress." "Because it was right," Minho said simply. Sora stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Humans," she muttered. "We are all crazy." She looked at Valora. "Fine, I will help you. Not for money, for him. Because someone who stands up like that deserves support." The plan was risky. Valora would need to use biosuppression technology to hide her markings completely. The device was painful for Altheans, like burning from the inside. But it was the only way to hide her identity. They moved to the spaceport district at dawn. Sora's ship, the Morning Star, was docked in the commercial section. It was small and old, but Sora kept it running perfectly. She gave Valora workers' clothes and a hood to cover her face. The biosuppressor was a small device that attached to Valora's neck. When Sora activated it, Valora gasped in pain. Her markings faded completely. Her skin became dull and gray. She looked sick. "I am sorry," Sora said. "But this is the only way." Valora nodded, unable to speak through the pain. They approached the checkpoint. Minho supported Valora, making it look like she was just a sick worker. Sora walked ahead, confident and casual. She handed over the cargo manifest to the guard. The Althean guard studied the papers. He looked bored. Just another day, another ship. Then his eyes settled on Valora. He frowned. "Her markings are very dim," the guard said. "Is she sick?" Minho's heart raced, but he kept his face calm. "Radiation exposure from the engine room. We are taking her to medical facilities off-world." The guard looked suspicious. He reached for his communication device. This was it. They were caught. Then alarms blared. Red lights flashed. The guard looked at his screen, suddenly alert. He waved them through quickly. "Go. Emergency security sweep." "Move your ship now!" They did not wait to be told twice. They ran for the ship. Sora's engines were already warming up. They barely made it through the airlock before she started the launch sequence. But as the Morning Star lifted off, more alarms sounded. The orbital defense platforms were locking onto them. Caranth's forces had figured it out. The emergency sweep had been for them. Hold on, Sora shouted. She pushed the engines hard, banking toward an asteroid field at the edge of the system. Weapons fire lit up the space around them. The ship shook with near misses. Minho held Valora as she collapsed. The biosuppressor had taken all her strength. The ship twisted and turned through the asteroids. Sora was a brilliant pilot. She knew every trick. The defense platforms could not follow them into the dense field. Finally, they broke free. Sora engaged the hyperspace drive. The stars stretched into lines of light. They were away. They had escaped. Valora removed the biosuppressor with shaking hands. Her markings slowly returned, but they were dimmer than ever. She looked at Minho, exhausted and grateful. She reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had touched him by choice. The gesture of an equal, not a ruler. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me as more than an empress." Then she closed her eyes and slept. For the first time in days she felt safe, because the human soldier was still there, still keeping watch, still refusing to leave. New Haven Station floated in neutral space belonging to no empire or government. It was a massive structure built over centuries by different species. Traders, refugees, and outcasts called it home. Here no one asked too many questions. It was the perfect place to disappear. Sora docked her ship in the commercial sector. The station was crowded and noisy. Aliens of every kind moved through the corridors. Some Minho recognized. Many he did not. The air smelled like 100 different worlds mixed together. Valora pulled her hood low. Without her imperial clothes and glowing markings at full brightness, she was just another Althean. But she walked differently now. Less proud. More cautious. The fall from power had changed her. Sora led them to a small apartment in the station's residential section. It was simple and clean. Nothing like a palace. Valora sat on the basic furniture and looked around. This was her life now. One small room on a neutral station. "I have a friend here," Sora said. "A scientist. She studies different species and how they interact. Her name is Dr. Choi Yunji. She might be able to help you." Dr. Choi arrived an hour later. She was a small Korean woman with bright, curious eyes behind thick glasses. She looked at Valora with scientific interest, then at Minho, then back at Valora. Her face lit up with excitement. "Fascinating," she said. "You are the ones everyone is talking about. The Empress and the loyal soldier. This is exactly what I study. Cross-species bonds and loyalty patterns." Valora looked uncomfortable. "We are not research subjects." "Of course not," Dr. Choi said quickly. "I am sorry. I get excited about my work. But I want to help you. Really help you." She sat down. "What are your plans?" Valora was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. My empire is gone. My people betrayed me. What can I do?" "You can learn," Minho said. Both women looked at him. "You can see what Caranth is really doing. Learn about your people from down here, not from a palace." Over the next weeks, that is exactly what happened. Dr. Choi introduced them to the Althean refugee community on New Haven. Hundreds had fled Caranth's rule. Nobles who refused to support him. Common people who spoke against him. Families who lost everything. Valora met them all. She listened to their stories. A merchant who lost his business because he would not pay Caranth's bribes. A mother whose son was taken for the military and never returned. An old noble whose family had served the empire for generations, now living in a tiny room. Each story changed her. She had thought Caranth was efficient but fair. She had been wrong. He was cruel. He took what he wanted and crushed anyone who resisted. And she had never seen it because she had been too comfortable in her palace. One evening, a young Althean female challenged her. Her name was Kira, and her markings were the bright purple of youth and anger. "Where were you?" Kira demanded. "When Caranth was taking our rights. When he was taxing us into poverty." "Where was the great Empress Valora?" The room went silent. Everyone waited for Valora's response. The old Valora would have been offended. Would have reminded Kira of her place. Would have turned away, but the new Valora just looked sad, her markings dimmed with shame. "You are right," she said quietly. "I was blind. I was comfortable. I listened to advisors who told me what I wanted to hear. I failed you. I failed all of you." She stood up. "I cannot change the past. But I can promise you this. If I ever get my throne back, I will do better. I will listen. I will see. I will be the Empress you deserved all along. Kira stared at her. Then slowly she nodded. It was not forgiveness, but it was a start. After the meeting, Valora and Minho walked through the station's observation deck. Through the windows, stars stretched in every direction. Beautiful and cold, I understand now, Valora said. Why you stayed? You saw something in me that I did not see in myself. You saw the person I could become. Minho smiled. I saw someone worth protecting. That is all? It was more than that, Valora looked at him. You believed I could change? No one else did. They all thought I was just a pampered ruler. But you gave me a chance. Dr. Choi found them there. Her face was serious. I have news, she said. And you need to see this. She showed them a secure message on her device. It was from someone on Althea Prime, someone in the temple. Priestess Yavara, keeper of the ancient traditions. The message was simple but powerful. The temple had refused to recognize Carinth as emperor. According to ancient law, only someone who passed the ritual of flame could truly claim the throne. Carinth had refused to take the ritual. He knew he would fail, but Valora could take the ritual. If she returned to the temple, if she passed the test, she would have legitimate authority. The people would see that the old ways still mattered. That power was not everything. This is dangerous, Dr. Choi warned. The temple is on Althea Prime. Carinth controls everything there. It is a trap. Maybe, Valora said, but it is also a chance. The only chance to take back my empire the right way, not with violence. With legitimacy. She looked at Minho. This means going back, walking into danger again. I cannot ask you to follow me. Minho's answer was the same as always. Simple and honest. I have not left yet, have I? Valora's markings brightened. For the first time since the coup, they glowed with real light, not the brilliant shine of an empress, but the warm glow of hope. They would return to Althea Prime. They would face Carinth again. They would risk everything one more time. But this time, Valora was not running. She was not hiding. She was ready to face her past, acknowledge her failures and fight for a better future. And the human soldier would be right beside her, as always. Getting back to Althea Prime was harder than leaving. Carinth had increased security everywhere. Every ship was searched. Every passenger was scanned. But the refugee network had been growing. People who hated Carinth's rule. People who wanted the old Empress back. They traveled hidden in a supply convoy bringing food to the mountain monasteries. Valora wore the simple robes of a pilgrim. Minho dressed as a monastery guard. They were just two more faces in a crowd of faithful travelers. The journey through the mountains was long and cold. Valora had never traveled this way before. As Empress, she had flown over these peaks in comfortable ships. Now she walked the ancient paths like common pilgrims had done for thousands of years. Along the way, they met ordinary people. Farmers bringing offerings to the temple. Workers seeking blessings for their families. An old couple who had walked these paths every year for 50 years. They shared food and stories with Valora, not knowing who she was. One evening, around a fire, a young father talked about his struggles. Carinth's new taxes had taken almost everything. His children were hungry. His wife was sick. But he still made this journey because faith was all he had left. Valora listened. Really listened. She had never understood before. The numbers on reports had meant nothing. But this man's pain was real. This was what her failure had allowed to happen. The Temple of Eternal Light stood on the highest peak. It was ancient, built from white stone that seemed to glow in the sunlight. Carinth soldiers surrounded the area, but they could not enter the temple grounds. Even he respected that law. To attack the temple would turn every believer against him. Priestess Yavara met them at the gate. She was very old, her markings faded to pale silver, but her eyes were sharp and kind. Empress Valora, she said with a bow. Welcome home. I am no empress anymore, Valora said quietly. That is for the ritual to decide, Yavara replied. She looked at Minho. And you are the human, the one who stayed. Minho nodded respectfully. Yavara smiled. Interesting. Very interesting. Come. We have much to prepare. The temple was peaceful inside, quiet and cool. Other priests moved through the halls like shadows. Yavara explained the ritual of flame. It was not a physical test. It was spiritual. The person taking the ritual had to face themselves completely. Every failure, every regret, every dark thought, and they had to do it in front of witnesses. Nothing could be hidden. Many rulers refused this ritual, Yavara said. They were too proud. They could not face their own weaknesses. Carinth definitely will not take it. But you must, Valora. You must show that you are worthy. That night, Valora could not sleep. She sat in the temple garden looking at the stars. Minho found her there. Are you afraid? He asked. Yes, she admitted. I have to face everything I did wrong. All the people I ignored. All the suffering I allowed. How can I do that? By being honest, Minho said. You have changed. You have learned. Show them that. What if it is not enough? Valora's voice was small. What if I am not enough? Minho sat beside her. You are not the same person who sat on that throne. You have walked among your people. You have listened. You have felt their pain. That matters. The next morning, the ritual began. The main temple hall filled with witnesses. Refugees who had followed them from New Haven. Mountain people who lived near the temple. Even some of Carinth's soldiers watched from outside, curious despite themselves. Valora stood before the eternal flame at the center of the hall. The flame had burned for 10,000 years, never going out. Yavra began the ancient prayers. Then Valora spoke. She told everything. She talked about her failures as Empress. She named people she had ignored. She described how comfortable she had been while her people suffered. She admitted her pride and her blindness. Her voice broke several times. Tears ran down her face. Her markings flickered with emotion. But she did not stop. She did not hide anything. She talked about the coup, about running through the streets in fear, about seeing her people from their level for the first time, about learning what her empire had truly become. And she talked about change, about how she wanted to be different, how she wanted to create a better empire, one where leaders served the people, not the other way around. When she finished, the hall was silent. Then slowly her markings began to glow, brighter and brighter. The eternal flame responded, burning higher. It was a sign. The temple itself was accepting her. Yavara stepped forward. The ritual is complete. The flame has judged you worthy, not because you are perfect, but because you can grow. You are ready to lead again. The people in the hall began to bow, one by one. Even those who had doubted. Even young Kira, who had challenged her on New Haven. But the moment of peace did not last long. Explosions rocked the temple. Carinth's forces were attacking. He had decided to break the ancient law. The temple was no longer safe. Minho grabbed his weapon. Other refugees prepared to fight. They were outnumbered badly, but they would not surrender. Then a message came through. A ship was approaching. A military ship. But it was not firing at the temple. It was firing at Carinth's forces. General Therix had returned. Valora's old friend who had betrayed her. He had been watching from afar. He had seen the ritual broadcast across secret channels. He had seen Valora's transformation, and he could not support Carinth anymore. 1/3 of Carinth's fleet followed Therix. They turned against their emperor. The battle for the empire had truly begun. Valora stood on the temple steps watching the ships fight in the sky above. Her markings blazed with purpose. She was no longer running. She was no longer hiding. She was the Empress again. But a different kind of Empress. One who had been broken and rebuilt. One who understood what leadership truly meant. And beside her stood Minho, still watching. Still protecting. Still believing in what she could become. The empire split in two. Carinth controlled the capital and most of the government. Valora held the temple in the hearts of many people. Neither side could win quickly. The conflict became a waiting game. General Therix arrived at the temple with his ships. He walked slowly up the steps, his head bowed. When he reached Valora, he knelt. "Your Majesty," he said, "I have no right to ask forgiveness. I betrayed you. I chose power over loyalty. I was wrong." Valora looked down at her old friend. Once she would have ordered his execution. But she was different now. She understood failure. She understood regret. "Stand up, Therix," she said. "I cannot forgive you yet. Trust must be earned back slowly, but I will give you a chance. Help me fix what we both broke." Therix stood, his markings bright with relief and shame. "I will not fail you again." With Therix's military knowledge, they organized their forces better. But Carinth was strong. He had the capital. He had most of the army. A direct attack would cause massive casualties. Valora did not want to win through violence. She wanted legitimacy. Ambassador Lee Taehyun from Earth arrived with a proposal. Human diplomats wanted to mediate peace talks. Earth had trade agreements with the Althean Empire. A civil war would hurt everyone. Plus, humans were neutral enough to be trusted by both sides. Carinth agreed to talks. He was confident. He thought he could negotiate from strength. The talks were held in a neutral location, a space station halfway between the temple and the capital. Minho went with Valora as her personal guard. He did not like the situation. Too many places for an ambush. Too many ways for things to go wrong. The meeting room was simple and bare. Carinth sat on one side with his advisors. Valora sat across from him with Minho standing behind her. Ambassador Lee sat at the head of the table. Carinth looked at Valora with cold eyes. "Cousin, you should have stayed hidden. This war is pointless. I have already won, have you?" Valora asked calmly. "You control the capital, yes. But the people are turning against you. Your methods are too harsh. They remember what the Empire was supposed to be." Carinth laughed. "The Empire was weak under you. Too soft, too traditional. I made it strong. I made it efficient. You made it cruel," Valora said. "Strength without justice is just tyranny." The negotiations went back and forth. Carinth wanted Valora to step down completely and go into exile. Valora proposed a compromise, a constitutional system where power was shared and balanced, where the Empress could not rule alone but where Carinth could not either. For a moment, it seemed like Carinth might agree. Then his expression changed, hardened. Minho saw it and knew. This had been a trap all along. "No," Carinth said. "I did not come here to negotiate. I came here to end this." Hidden weapons activated. Carinth's guards pulled their guns. This was an assassination attempt during peace talks, the most dishonorable thing possible in Althean culture. Minho moved faster than thought. He threw himself in front of Valora just as the weapons fired. The blast hit him square in the chest. He felt fire, pain, then numbness spreading through his body. He hit the floor hard. Through blurring vision, he saw Tharix's guards burst in, returning fire. Ambassador Lee was shouting into his communicator. Carinth was escaping through a side door. Then Valora was there, kneeling beside him, her face above his, her markings blazing brighter than he had ever seen them. She was crying. Altheans rarely cried. It was considered a weakness. But Valora was crying now, tears falling on his face. "Minho," she said. Her voice was breaking. "Minho, stay with me, please," he tried to speak. It was hard. Everything was hard. But he needed to say this. "You do not need me anymore," he whispered. "You never did. You just needed to see yourself clearly." "No," Valora said fiercely. "I do need you. You stayed when everyone left. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You cannot leave me now." Minho wanted to answer, but the darkness was pulling at him. His eyes closed. The last thing he heard was Valora's voice, commanding and desperate at the same time. "Get a medical ship here now. I will not let him die." Then nothing. The assassination attempt changed everything. The whole galaxy saw what Carinth did. He attacked during peace talks. He tried to murder his cousin while negotiating. Even his own supporters were shocked. Commanders started defecting. Soldiers refused orders. The common people rose up in protest. Carinth had gone too far, and the image of Valora holding the dying human soldier spread across every network. Her markings blazing with grief and fury, her tears falling freely. An empress who loved her protector. An empress who had learned to feel. The people saw her differently now, not as a distant ruler, but as someone who had suffered. Someone who had changed. Someone who cared. Dr. Choi worked frantically to save Minho. The wound was terrible. His heart had stopped twice. But human bodies were tough. Humans were survivors. And Choi was a brilliant doctor. Valora did not leave his side. She held his hand as machines kept him alive. She talked to him even though he could not hear. She made him a promise. "When you wake up," she said, "this war will be over, and we will build something better together. I promise you." Her markings glowed with determination. Carinth had made his final mistake. Now she would finish this. Not with violence alone, but with the legitimacy she had earned. With the people who believed in her. The final battle was coming. And this time she would win. Carinth's empire collapsed like a house made of sand. His commanders refused to follow him. His soldiers laid down their weapons. The people opened the gates of the capital city and welcomed Valora's forces inside. There was no great battle. No massive destruction. Corinth's power had been built on fear and force. When the people stopped being afraid, when his forces stopped obeying, he had nothing left. Valora marched through the capital streets. Not in a grand vehicle. She walked. The same way she had walked through the lower city when she was running for her life. The people lined the streets to see her. Some cheered. Some just watched quietly. All of them saw an empress who had changed. Corinth made his last stand in the palace throne room, the same place where the coup had begun. He sat on the throne with his few remaining loyal guards around him. When Valora entered, he stood. His markings were dim with defeat, but his voice was still proud. "Go ahead," he said. "Execute me. Prove that you are no different than me." Valora looked at him. Once she might have done exactly that, but she was not that empress anymore. "No," she said.
"I will not kill you."
"That would make you a martyr. Instead you will live, but not here, not in power. You will be exiled to the outer colonies. You will live a simple life, without authority, without influence. You will be forgotten." For Corinth, who craved power above all else, this was worse than death. To be nobody. To be forgotten. His markings flickered with rage and despair. "History will remember that I was right," he said bitterly. "Perhaps," Valora said, "but I will try to prove you wrong." Every single day, Corinth was taken away. His guards surrendered without fighting. The coup was over. The empire was Valora's again, but Valora's first act was not to sit on the throne. It was to go to the medical center where Minho lay. Dr. Choi met her at the door. "He is stable," Choi said with a tired smile. "The surgery was difficult, but he will live. Humans are incredibly tough. He should wake up soon." Relief washed over Valora. Her markings brightened for the first time in days. She entered the room quietly. Minho looked small in the medical bed, surrounded by machines and tubes. But his chest was rising and falling steadily. He was alive. She sat beside him and took his hand. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "The war is over. Now wake up. We have work to do." 3 days later, Minho opened his eyes. Valora was still there, asleep in the chair beside his bed. He smiled despite the pain in his chest. She had stayed, just like he had stayed for her. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. She woke instantly. When she saw his open eyes, her markings blazed with joy. "Minho, you are awake!" "Did we win?" he asked. "Yes," she said, "we won. The empire is ours again." "Good," Minho said. Then he smiled. "What comes next?" "Change," Valora said. "Real change. I am creating a council to share power. Representatives from every level of society. The Empress will not rule alone anymore. The people will have a voice." Minho nodded approvingly. "That is good. And I need an advisor," Valora continued. "Someone who will tell me the truth even when it is hard to hear. Someone who stayed when everyone else ran." She looked at him seriously. "Will you accept the position?" Minho was quiet for a moment. Commander Park had been sending messages. Earth wanted him to come home. There would be medals and honors. A promotion. A comfortable life. But he looked at Valora and saw someone who had transformed. Who had learned and grown. Who would try every day to be better. "That was worth more than medals, I accept," he said. Over the next months, the empire changed, slowly but surely. The new council met regularly. Laws were passed to protect workers and common people. The lower city received support and resources. It was not perfect. Change never was. But it was better. Minho recovered fully, though he carried scars from his wounds. He became known throughout the galaxy as the human who stayed. His story inspired others. Humans across the stars found new respect because of what he had done. Valora created the Order of the Eternal Flame. It honored those who showed exceptional loyalty and courage. The first member, of course, was Minho. 5 years passed. The empire prospered under the new system. People were happier. The economy grew. Other empires looked to Althea Prime as an example of positive change. One evening, Valora and Minho walked through the palace gardens. The same gardens where she had once walked alone, surrounded by servants but feeling isolated. Now she walked with a friend, a true friend who had seen her at her lowest and believed in her anyway. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Staying with me? You gave up so much." Minho looked at the palace, at the thriving city beyond, at the Empress who had become a true leader. He thought about all the lives that had changed because he had made one simple choice. To stay when logic said to run. Not for a second, he said. Some things are worth staying for. Valora's markings glowed warmly. The Althean way of smiling. They walked together in comfortable silence, two very different beings who had found understanding. An empress who had learned humility. A soldier who had taught the meaning of loyalty. The galaxy watched their story and learned. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing. Sometimes staying is braver than running. Sometimes one person's choice can change everything. And sometimes when everyone else deserts someone in need, there is one person who stays.